right now on a special edition of Law&Crime's Daily Debrief. Closing arguments are complete in the sex crimes trial of movie producer Harvey Weinstein.
Mr. Weinstein couldn't be stopped when he wanted what he wanted.
His accusers have strength in numbers, but his attorneys say,
I think he's confident, and this is a tough situation for anybody to be in.
We're live at the courthouse. Also, celebrity attorney Michael Avenatti guilty of extorting money from Nike. Plus, the Parkland school shooting 2 years later, what's become of the criminal cases. And a 40-year-old murder of an Iowa teenager solved, prosecutors say, by DNA. The Daily Debrief brings you the day in court. It's Friday, February 14th.
Good evening, everybody, from outside the New York Supreme Courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where today prosecutors presented closing arguments in the Harvey Weinstein sex crimes trial. The jury begins its deliberations on Tuesday after Monday's holiday. There's a lot happening outside the courtroom right now, but let's go straight to Jesse Weber, who's here in the midst of everything. Jesse, you were inside for those closing arguments. Tell us what you know.
That's right, Aaron. We saw a fiery closing argument from prosecutor Jonah Luzzi, where she described Harvey Weinstein as a violent rapist who treated these women as disposables, continuously using tricks and surprises to isolate his victims and ultimately assault them. She kept going on and saying that women have nothing to gain by testifying against Harvey Weinstein, but they are compelled by their own morality. We shouldn't blame sex crime victims for putting themselves in situations or going to a man's apartment or hotel room. That doesn't mean that they're looking for sex, and that doesn't mean that they're asking to be raped. She moved on to Annabella Shore and came up with a theory about how Harvey Weinstein was able to get up to her apartment and rape her. She also highlighted how Harvey Weinstein wanted Annabella Shore investigated even before she came forward with her allegations, which begs the question, why would he care about her unless he did something wrong? Prosecutor Luzzi then moved on to Miriam Haley and saying this was a vulnerable girl that Harvey Weinstein took advantage of. She came to his apartment back in 2006 in order to mend a professional relationship. She wasn't looking for sex. Prosecutor Luzzi then moved on to Jessica Mann and said that this relationship that she had with Harvey Weinstein over time was never consensual, but it was filled with fear and pressure. And even if she loved him, he had no right to rape her in 2013. The three Molyneux witnesses were always consistent in their statements, and they shouldn't be shamed for not telling their stories initially. Prosecutor Luzzi didn't waste any moment by taking hits at the defense, including their summation about how it seemed inappropriate for these women to lawyer up. Well, according to Prosecutor Luzzi, it was reasonable for these women to get lawyers to navigate this situation. And look at Harvey Weinstein. He has 5 lawyers himself. Speaking of which, we actually heard from Gloria Allred, who is a lawyer representing several of the accusers in this case, and she said, in her opinion, that Ada Luzzi was at her best during this closing argument.
She wasn't interested in him romantically. She was not interested in him sexually, and she testified to that. But did that stop Harvey Weinstein? No, it did not. Because Mr. Weinstein couldn't be stopped when he wanted what he wanted. This is not a transaction like a sex worker, is what the prosecution shared with the jury today. This is completely different. This is a vulnerable woman who needs a job and is worried about her status in the United States. She's not from the United States, and she wants him to like her. She's afraid of him. And she recalled the testimony that he pushed her onto the bed in the apartment. She kept saying, no, I'm on my period. No, and that she testified that she fought him off, but he was much larger. And she said, I'm on my period. And his response was to pull out her tampon and engage in oral sex with her.
So now the jury was sent home for a long 3-day weekend, and beginning on Tuesday is when that jury is going to be handed the case for deliberations, Aaron.
Jesse, you're inside listening to everything and, of course, watching everything. We can't see it. You can. What's it look like inside the courtroom? How's the jury absorbing all of this?
It's such a tense area. It's fully packed. The jury has seemed so attentive to the closing arguments today as much as they did yesterday. They were taking notes. Any slide that was put up there, they were very watching everything. And even though this was a shorter closing argument than we saw yesterday. They didn't miss a beat. I think this is what they were really looking for, an opportunity to hear the case summarized on both ends.
What's Weinstein's demeanor been during the closing arguments?
He seems to be pretty happy. I mean, he seems to be pretty jovial, especially after what happened yesterday with Donna Rotunno. He, as you know, quoted, he said it was the Queen's speech. He's been all smiles. In my opinion, that appears that he feels confident about where his case is going into the long weekend.
Any sense of how the parties cooperated through the course of this case, the prosecution and the defense? I
mean, it got tense. Really points. They took shots at each other during their closing arguments. I think they're both happy to be ending with it. But there was a level of cordiality and professionalism. But now it's up to the jury.
Exactly. Law&Crime's Jesse Weber, thanks a lot for sticking in there for us out in the cold here throughout the midst of this case. Let's take a look now at the charges Harvey Weinstein is facing. We have them to put up on your screen right now. The first 2 counts relate to accuser Mimi Haley. The last 3 counts relate to accuser Jessica Mann. Predatory sexual assault is the top charge. That is the charge that, if prosecutors prove it, could result in a life sentence. We are going to listen back now to the defense closing arguments, key moments from that point in the case. The defense went yesterday. Let's recap what the defense said and also what the defense shared with reporters outside this courthouse today.
Entering court for the last day he would be able to litigate his side of the story, Harvey Weinstein made it clear his attorneys would do the talking.
Harvey, what point does the defense need to get over today? What's the point?
Trust of these lawyers.
Characterizing Weinstein's accusers as opportunists and even as liars, the defense used communications from the accusers themselves in an attempt to discredit their testimony and raise reasonable doubt against the prosecution's claims that crimes occurred.
The evidence shows consensual relationships. So if you claim that what you say happened, it belies common sense that you would then go out and send the emails, have the contact, continue relationships, send your phone numbers. So that's the reason. That is consent. The evidence shows consent.
He was a target of a cause and of a movement, Weinstein defense attorney Donna Rotunno told the jury. Referencing the accusers, she said, in their universe, women are not responsible for the parties they attend, the men they flirt with, the choices they make to further their own careers, the hotel room invitations, the plane tickets they accept, the jobs they ask for help to obtain. Rotunno told the jury accuser Mimi Haley had more of a relationship than she wants you to believe with Weinstein. And Rotunno told the jury accuser Jessica Mann couldn't keep anything straight under cross-examination. During testimony, Mann sobbed on the witness stand, causing a halt in proceedings. In closings, Rotunno said Weinstein's accusers were after a pot of gold, a claim 2 attorneys who represent some accusers refuted.
Ms. Wolf had no interest in any civil compensation because her claim, she has no civil claim. Her claims are barred by the civil statutes of limitation. So for Ms. Rotunno to get up in front of a jury where there's no evidence in the record otherwise to suggest that Ms. Wolf or myself are here to try and seek compensation from Mr. Weinstein on her behalf is completely disingenuous.
She presented no evidence, zero, nada, zilch, that I have been retained for the purpose of any civil lawsuit. So it's an attempt to show bias that maybe somebody would want to be compensated for what they allege is a rape or sexual abuse. And by the way, if anybody does want to be compensated because they've been raped, sexually harassed, sexually abused, well, they should have every right to do so. The cost of the wrong should not be borne by the victim. The cost of the wrong should be borne by the wrongdoer.
Rotunno said she had to address the Me Too movement and the money because of the press.
Well, I had to focus on that because all of you focus on it every day. So it was something that I had to bring up. I had to bring it up.
Rotunno also attacked the so-called other bad acts witnesses who testified to bolster the claims made by Weinstein's 2 primary accusers. Rotunno said testimony by actress Annabella Sciorra, who claims Weinstein raped her, doesn't add up because Weinstein couldn't have gotten past Sciorra's doorman, who testified for the defense. Rotunno also said actress Rosie Perez was lying when Perez claimed Sciorra told her about the attack. Sciorra said she didn't even remember telling Perez. Rosie did what a friend does. She lied, Rotunno told the jury.
We feel good about where we are. This is a case that should be about evidence. It shouldn't be about emotion. It shouldn't be about feelings, and it's not a popularity contest. And in this case, the evidence was all on our side.
Let's jump in with some analysis right now. Two attorneys are with me tonight. Michael Bryant is in studio back in New York. Colleen Middleton also joining me. Colleen, listening to what was said during the closing arguments here, what's your assessment of the performance of the state and the defense?
You know, they both, I think, did a great job. I mean, it's a difficult case because of the age of these incidents. I also think that, there were so many witnesses, on the stand. They were compelling. They corroborated one another with Perez, et cetera. So, I think that both had a difficult case for many reasons, but I think they both did a good job.
Michael Bryant also with me tonight. Michael, you've listened to both sides at this point. What's your assessment? I wish we could actually listen to these arguments or see them. The judge didn't allow cameras during the closing arguments point of this, and New York law prevents us from ever showing witnesses. Sometimes they'll let us in for closing arguments, but the judge didn't here. So based on what we do know, Michael, your assessment?
Yeah, clearly zealous representation on both sides. And I think from the arguments, what each side is concerned about. The defense is pointing out that all of these alleged acts took place, and then there was an ongoing relationship with Harvey Weinstein. That's not common sense. That's not New York common sense. Whereas the prosecution said, look, our witnesses were credible. They gave details, painful details, I might add, that suggest they were telling the truth. And those are the battle lines.
A lot for the jury to weigh as the jury moves forward. We also have another guest with us tonight. Dr. John Delator is a psychologist. He's going to discuss with me another issue that's popped up in this case. And Dr. Delator, the defense is basically resting its entire theory on convincing the jury that the state's expert is not to be trusted, basically, that this could not have been something that makes any sense, because someone who was heavily victimized ultimately would not stick with the person who did the victimizing. Does that make sense from your perspective as an expert?
No, not at all. A lot of these times, these individuals are manipulated into believing that what happened was their fault. And so it comes to the point where the word yes has no value if they don't have the option of saying no. And for them, they didn't have the option of saying no. If they wanted to advance their career, they had to do whatever he said. And that meant further victimization. And they had to agree that it was okay.
And Dr. Delator, ultimately, then you think that the defense's version of this should not be believed and that the state and the state's experts should be?
Yes, there's too many. There are too many consistencies across all of these stories to suggest that all of them are lying or all of them are part of some kind of movement and all of them are targeting Harvey Weinstein. It seems unlikely for that to be occurring. So it's going to be up to the jury to then decide how much weight do they put into the expert and how much weight do they put into this idea that all of these women are just gathered together to target this one person.
Precisely, Dr. Delator, appreciate your opinions tonight here on The Debrief. And still ahead tonight, we're going to head to Iowa for a cold case there dating all the way back to 1979. The defendant in this case says he is innocent as the state attempts to use very little but DNA evidence to link him to what the state suggests is a random killing of a teenaged woman. Welcome back live to Lower Manhattan. There are several other matters we're following tonight other than the Weinstein trial. A federal jury has convicted celebrity attorney Michael Avenatti of attempting to extort money from athletic giant Nike. Avenatti claimed he was investigating inappropriate payments to athletes and said he wanted to get paid or else he would go public with his claims and tank the company's stock. Avenatti tried to characterize the conversation as a legitimate settlement. The jury disagreed. Avenatti faces a minimum sentence of 20 years by law. Today marks 2 years since the killings of 17 people and the wounding of 17 others at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. The school shared social media remembrances as murder and attempted murder cases move forward against Nicholas Cruz, the defendant. The defense has asked repeatedly for more time to prepare for trial. The state accuses the defense of stall tactics. A hearing next month aims to set a trial date, likely this summer. Let's head to Iowa now for testimony in a cold case murder that dates back some 40 years in that state. Prosecutors in Cedar Rapids say Jerry Burns, now 66 years old, murdered then 18-year-old Michelle Martinko back when Burns was just 25. The 40-year-old case languished until DNA tests were invented and public genealogy databases became weapons for law enforcement. Authorities say Michelle Martinko suffered 29 wounds, including 11 stab wounds. Prosecutors say the killer left behind blood on Martinko's clothing and on the gear shift of her parents' car where her body was found. DNA from that blood led police to the suspect's relatives, then to the suspect. Prosecutors say DNA gathered from a straw the suspect discarded at a pizza place is consistent with blood from the 40-year-old crime scene. The medical examiner who performed the victim's autopsy testified with these findings.
I identified 29 wounds, sharp-edged wounds. I was able to identify 11 stab wounds, 7 over the chest, 4 elsewhere. She was on her back, and the wounds were all in the front, so he was in front of her or on top of her. If you look at both edges of the wound, they're sharp. It could be a knife that, either a double-edged knife or a knife that's curved. In other words, it comes to a point, and as it goes into the wound, it hits the wound and it slices.
What opinion do you have as to the force that would be required to inflict these wounds?
Well, as I described once, it can't be a pet. It has to be a real whop. I mean, it has to have a lot of force.
Do you believe that it is reasonable a suspect could have cut themselves during an assault like this?
Yes.
What is your opinion as to the cause of her death? How did she die?
She bled to death, internally and externally. She had blood all over her, but all the internal bleeding from me, and I put the fatal wound.
Witnesses describe blood sprayed throughout the victim's car. On cross-examination, the defense wanted to know if that expert could tell which wound that blood came from.
I think any wound, face wounds are notorious for bleeding excessively. So even though they look any face wound like that, minor arteries, you cut a artery, it'll bleed. So I can't tell which wound caused the bleeding. Any of them.
But stated differently, there were enough wounds that could have caused a lot of external blood loss, right?
I think you're trying to ask me, with all the blood around, am I able to tell you where that blood came from? Is that kind of what you're asking me?
We'll start there.
Yeah. And the answer is no. I can't tell you where it came from the wounds. Which ones? All of them.
An analyst then described DNA found on the dress the victim was wearing and on the gear shift of the vehicle where her body was found.
The victim's dress gave a nice, what I would describe as a nice, clean, single-source profile, and I was able to determine types at each of the loci that were examined. The shift selector, item I, if you would only look at the LDLR loci, it would look like it was a type AB, but the other loci show imbalances and indicate that there's another blood sample mixed with that one, or another DNA source mixed with that sample.
The defense pressed that analyst for more on the DNA found on the victim's dress, which apparently was bagged together with the victim's pantyhose and her underwear.
When these items were submitted to the laboratory, they were bundled or bunched together. Is that why it's considered one exhibit for purposes of your examination?
Yes.
But as I understand your testimony this morning, when you were looking at these exhibits, you only examined the dress.
Correct.
You didn't look at the pantyhose or the panties?
No. Other than that, they were present.
You've also been instructed and probably have taught on the dangers of contamination or cross-contamination of items of evidence that are bundled together?
Yes, contamination is an issue that we are aware of.
These items received by you in February of 1997, you don't have any knowledge about how those items were handled before they reached you, do you?
None. That's correct.
You have to kind of rely on the integrity of the law enforcement agency or the investigator, that they've taken steps to avoid contamination, alteration of the exhibits before you get them.
Yes.
Testimony in that case continues next week. And again, next week here in Lower Manhattan, the jury will deliberate the Harvey Weinstein sex crimes trial. I want to jump in with Dr. John Delator. Dr. Delator, can you give us any assessment psychologically into the way a jury has to come together on a case that's this hotly contested?
You know, it's going to be extremely complicated for the jury to kind of decide how they want to approach this. Ultimately, they're going to be looking at, do they think Harvey Weinstein is a predator? And based on how he's being presented himself, just the optics of it might shift how the jury ends up deciding how they're going to go, or what kind, how far they're willing to go when it comes to determining whether or not he's guilty.
Attorney Colleen Middleton also with me here tonight. Attorney Middleton, one theory is that there may be two separate camps on this jury, that some jurors may want to acquit, some may want to convict, and then it turns into a battle of personalities.
Absolutely, and who is the foreperson? That will be important. But this case raises such emotional issues for people. I do think it'll take some time for them to come together and, articulate all of their positions on the jury, et cetera. And I think that people have very strong personal beliefs already. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in a group setting, if people are going to be, willing to be influenced.
Michael Bryant, any chance for a potential split verdict in this case? Some convictions and some acquittals.
Yeah, you're reading my mind there, Aaron. I would not be surprised to see some sort of compromise here. Not a clean sweep for acquittal, not a clean sweep for all guilty, but just an agreement that, yeah, he's a bad dude. We're not sure he did all the things that have been claimed.
A lot for the jury to discuss when it comes back to enter official deliberations on Tuesday here in Lower Manhattan. Of course, we will be here watching, as we have been throughout the Weinstein trial. We need to wrap up things on the Daily Debrief on a very cold evening in Lower Manhattan. Have a good weekend, everybody. And again, we'll be back here watching this case very closely starting on Tuesday.